What's going on, everybody? I hope you're having a wonderful week. It's my amazing honor to bring this guest to you guys today. Now, this podcast is called Art, Talk, Music because they happen to be the three facets of my life that I'm most passionate about. And speaking about local artists, which we have quite a few of them here between Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Taos, and all of New Mexico, really. Reyes Padilla is originally from Santa Fe, New Mexico, and has been making waves in Albuquerque. Originally, I met Reyes when he was showing his work at the Satellite Coffee Shop that was right off of Central in Carlisle, here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I commented to the barista how cool the pieces that were little owls and all these different figures painted on logs of wood as a canvas. And as I complimented and spoke to the barista about how much I enjoyed the art, he pointed over towards someone sitting down drinking some coffee and says, "That's the artist right over there. You can just go say hello to him." And I did. And Reyes is such a sweet guy and has an incredible story of not just being a musician himself, but having this thing titled synesthesia, which, as I have pulled up here, the little dictionary description or definition of what synesthesia is, it says as follows: synesthesia is a perceptual phenomenon in which stimulation of one sensory or cognitive pathway leads to automatic involuntary experiences in a second sensory or cognitive pathway. Now, Reyes has a beautiful statement which really ties the two of them together, which for him is music and art. Reyes says, "I paint music. Having synesthesia means that I experience sound visually. My work is created by actively painting what I see while listening to music. The decision to embrace what I am seeing and paint it in the moment seems like a natural dance between two worlds." And that it truly is, Reyes. It's beautiful. I had the extreme honor and privilege to have Mr. Reyes Padilla paint a piece using the single of my very first album back in July of 2016. And Reyes was awesome enough to bring his setup and paint a 12 by 12 piece, which was inspired by my song Like Me. And we talk a little bit about it in the podcast. So at the very end of this episode, I'll say a couple words and I'll play that song so you can enjoy it, as well as you'll be able to check out a little link to see that artwork. I appreciate Reyes for coming on, and I appreciate you for listening. If you happen to enjoy some of these podcasts, and if you're listening to this on iTunes, I definitely encourage you to subscribe. And if you're not, maybe you're listening to it on your browser, on your phone, maybe you can bookmark this. Either way, we appreciate you listening, and we hope you come back for more. I know you're really going to enjoy this podcast, so I'm going to stop talking and get to the conversation. Without further ado, please help me welcome my man, Mr. Reyes Padilla. And we are live with Mr. Reyes Padilla here in the studio in downtown Old Town, New Mexico, right?
Right in the middle.
Right in the middle, right? This is the sweet spot right in between downtown and Old Town.
Yep, we're here at the Harwood Art Center, where there's galleries and studios and even a school in the back.
You've been here for a couple of years, right? Like you've had a studio here for many years? How many years?
I got into the first studio I had here in, I think, 2016. And then, yeah, I've been here ever since then.
And before then, you were at the Cosmos, right?
Yeah, over at the factory on Fifth. I had that studio for almost 5 years, and
Wow.
it was a good starting point for, painting outside of the house studio and
Yes.
really expanding and trying to create a discipline where you have to leave your house and go work elsewhere.
It's an awesome separation, right? Like once you finally are able to do that, because then you are like, okay, I'm going to go to work.
Yeah. I don't think I could do it at home these days. There's too many distractions, like the kitchen. Kitchen's like a major distraction. I get super hungry when I work, and if that's not accessible to me, I'm good.
Yeah.
But that's a slippery slope, and it's good to have that routine of coming into a place that's strictly for your work.
So you've been making art for many years. I believe you're about me and David's age. You graduated high school, what, 2008, 2007?
2006, yeah.
What high school did you graduate from?
St. Mike's in Santa Fe.
That's right, okay.
Yeah.
Right. And you came down to UNM after that?
No, UNM rejected me, and I wasn't a good student at all. And I was mostly focused on music back then, and didn't really see myself going to school. And luckily, after I moved down here to Albuquerque, my sister came through and was like, "What are you doing? What's the deal? What are you going to do with your life?" And she's like, "Well, maybe just go to CNM and see what's up. See if you like any classes they have." So CNM, Central New Mexico Community College, and we went over there, and I signed up for a couple art classes because I just recently learned how to oil paint, and I kind of felt a nice draw to that, and so that kind of helped me get motivated and put me on a decent path.
So before we get into the beginning of that CNM and that art and that oil relationship, tell me a little bit about the musical relationship. You played guitar?
Yeah, I played guitar and sang in a band for a few years, and
What kind of band? What would you describe it as?
Like real melodic alternative rock. It was kind of a little angst, coming out of the teenage years, and it was just a lot of fun sounds that we just kind of play with, and I kind of learned guitar to be in that band, and so I'm not classically trained in any ways, but it started to work out. I started writing music, and music has just always had a very profound influence on my life, because I'd later learned that I had synesthesia, and seeing sounds is not something that every person experiences. So music just kind of hits me pretty deep in that way.
When did the relationship between the two really jump out at you? I mean, obviously you found out about it later in life, but do you remember a point that kind of stood out at you as far as a song or a time in your life when you were just hearing music and it was very visual? Or
yeah, like every sound is super visual to me, like constant. It's just a thing that I'm super used to, but I was noticing, like, I would describe things in colors, like sounds, and
we're gonna take a little pause for 1 second, and we're back. So we're talking about synesthesia.
So I guess the first time I really noticed that I had it was I had kind of snuck into a UNM music appreciation class one day with our drummer, and she was taking that class, and the professor that day happened to be talking about synesthesia, and and giving statistics like 1 in 20 people have this thing, and your senses are crossing and you're experiencing one sense like with another. So some people see colors when they taste food, and see things when they hear sounds. And I'm just like sitting in that class like, how have I never heard this before? That's exactly what I'm experiencing all the time. And the more I've dove into it over the years, it shows me parts of my brain that I understand a little bit more. Like I experience problem solving differently, anxiety differently, like visually, everything kind of comes in. Things you can't see develop a visual in my mind, so it plays a major part.
So transitioning into your early years, what was kind of your first stop? Because when I first kind of came to meet you, if my memory serves me correctly, the first memory I have, of course I should say, was at Satellite when I was admiring your work on the walls, and I was mentioning to the people at that Satellite, which sadly isn't there anymore. It's the one that is across from that skyline. And you had your owls up, and I was just like, man, this work is awesome. I freaking love it. They were like, oh yeah, that's awesome. Man, the artist is sitting right over there. It's like, oh shit, you're the artist. And you were like, yeah, you're David's friend. I know you.
Yeah.
And it was like, it was such a trip to see your artwork from there and see the evolution from those logs and those animals and, that style of work into kind of what it's progressed into. But kind of what were your early styles, and kind of what was the trajectory of getting to where you're at now with your style?
Well, learning to oil paint was based off of, I chose oil because it was so much slicker and nice like to work with than acrylic. My art teacher, I asked like, what should I use, oil or acrylic? And he kind of was like, do you want to drive a Lamborghini or like an old shitty Chevy S10? And like, so he turned me on to oils, and then my subject matter kind of went in a dark context right away, because I was just interested in a lot of innocence and corruption themes, things that I was reading and things that I was experiencing as just a growing person. And so a lot of that interested me. So I would portray that in weird scenarios on a canvas, a lot of rotting apple cores and snakes, and just odd contrast between innocence and corruption. Then I just started getting into trippy owls and things like that, kind of just honing my craft. Painted lowriders and whatever seemed cool to me, I'd go with it. And then after painting a series of like hyper realistic eyeballs and just kind of killing myself on that particular project, what I do now came out. Just this abstract acrylic paint from my heart, that is born out of music. Yeah. So yeah, it's all that kind of built up to just painting what is true to me, and I'm finding new ways to develop that part of myself, because once you like lock into, oh, this is me, this is what I want to be doing, this is what comes most natural, and this is what I have the most fun with, you got to start developing that and bring it to light in new ways, like by experimenting with materials and things like that.
You definitely have been experimenting quite a bit with a lot of materials. One piece that we were talking about in particular that you've already sold is a beautiful gold leaf piece. Mm-hmm. Tell me about that and how a material like gold began affecting your palette.
Man, I never expected to even use gold, and I did a commission for a woman out in Washington, D.C. Almost 2 years ago, and she wanted gold leaf in the piece. And so it was one of those commissions that really made me learn a lot of things really fast. And so after I did that, I became addicted like right away. And it's amazing how many colors gold can complement. And it kind of goes, it's like usually this work was always very black and white, monochromatic.
Right.
And gold kind of has a monochromatic element to it because it's so versatile. And I mean, everything looks good next to gold, really.
Say it, man. That's true. Mm-hmm. So you initially began this series, as you hinted at just a second ago, with just black and white, right?
Uh-huh.
Was that the way the style kind of began, and you stayed there for a little bit before colors started coming in the picture? Or were you messing up right away with colors? Obviously, your work before was very colorful and had beautiful stains on the wood pieces. Are the ones that I remember specifically, but I know you know quite a bit more work. But how did the reintroduction of color come about within this work?
It was the time to introduce it. The black and white developed just basically because I'm pretty colorblind, and I decided to just work monochromatically, and this abstract style that I wasn't used to kind of made me lean into something more simple, because while I'm experiencing synesthesia and seeing sounds while I'm listening to music, I'm seeing a lot of colors and all that, but I had to decide whether I was going to focus on the movement of what I was seeing or the colors, and it turned out that it would just come out a little easier if I just did black, white. And then just in developing my work, I started to try and experiment with certain colors. And it is a challenge because of being colorblind, but it's also kind of fun because you're seeing something that no one else is seeing.
Yes, it's a profound experience to, even for the viewer, for the observer to notice and recognize.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about collaborative work, because it seems to be something that I see you involved quite a bit in. You've got a series coming out soon, a show happening pretty soon, which is a part 2.
Part 2.
Tell me a little bit about that.
So that'll be Synesthesia 2 with David Santiago, who I've known for a number of years now, back when we were kind of getting started with showing locally. And we did a show about 2 years ago where we just kind of each did half the panels that we were going to show, and then we swapped them and went over each other's work. And the show ended up being a huge hit, and it was a good success. And so immediately after, we were talking about doing a second one, and we've put it in our calendars a number of times, and it kept getting pushed back. Like, thankfully, we're both super busy, and finally we found that April 27th, 2019 is going to be the time to make it happen.
And where is it going to take place?
It'll be here at the Harwood Art Center in the upstairs South Gallery.
Beautiful. So definitely, as I would guess, art or music is in your blood. Tell me a little bit about that. Or is it not?
No, it is. I mean, I never thought it was when I was growing up, because I always felt like kind of the odd member of the family.
Sure.
And the older I got, I realized that I did have a few family members that are making a living off of art or literature. Some musicians. A lot of my family has been either involved with the arts or just drawn to it. And so that has been like a really nice guide for me, because I can look at my uncle Luis Tapia, and before I was working as a full-time artist, I could see, hey, someone I know is actually doing this thing that all my teachers, all these people around me are telling me is an impossibility. Like, everyone says that you can't make a living as an artist, but there's some truth to that and the difficulty, but it's really, it's an attainable thing. But it's just all about putting the work in, and you can't like back down if over a rejection or two, it's just, I feel like I couldn't be doing anything else. So I feel like it is in my blood, like 100%. School wasn't a good thing for me. And, I couldn't do like customer service my whole life. So, and this just kind of like fits my lifestyle, and I have that drive that keeps me coming in every day, even when I don't feel inspired or whatever. So yeah, it was important to see those people around me able to do it.
So tell me a little bit about this. This thing you're talking about is something that obviously all arts students hear when they're coming up,
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you want to be a musician? Well, you better have a second plan, because you're not going to make a living playing music,
Right.
Did this in some ways fuel you, or, I mean, what did you take from that when the teachers told you that? I mean, obviously you already said you had your uncle there,
Yeah, and even since I was a little kid, like I had this like really strong belief that you could do whatever you wanted. Like I thought I was going to play NBA when I was like in 4th grade. I was just like, I don't care if like, I'm a short little Hispanic kid.
Yeah.
Like if I just want it bad enough and like work on it, I can make that happen. Of course, I'm not playing NBA these days, but but I always had that like strong belief that you create your own future. What you put out in the world comes back to you, and so art is one of those things where you really have to commit and put in the time. And sometimes it takes a long time. Like you can get really used to nothing coming out of it, and then one day something happens and you realize, you see like, oh my, that hard work paid off, And
you're saying these words, you've said them a couple of times already, but it is a true narrative that I think also serves for all of the arts, which is, I say, I'm not going to tell you good luck because I don't believe in luck. It's hard work.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we do,
Mm-hmm.
And the hard work pays off for us today or tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
And if not tomorrow, then we better work hard so that the next day it pays off,
Exactly.
And it's like, that's all we can do, man. Keep plowing forward with the dream of it.
Yeah, and I think teachers should talk more about that as well, because if the teachers are just saying like, you have this like 0.0001% chance of like actually making it, where you can survive on your artwork, that's immediately gonna just knock a bunch of kids down.
Yeah.
Like a bunch of brilliant minds, and it's at that point it's more about how they were raised and how they're going to take that information.
Yep.
So yeah, it really needs to be encouraged.
I agree, man. My father and my brother and I attended in Philadelphia this past year an international sculpture conference.
Mm-hmm.
And in the sculpture conference, one of the panel discussions that they had, someone had asked, it was a bunch of educators had come and were talking about their process of teaching sculptures. Future sculptors about the craft and the art form and all these things, and someone in the audience raised their hand and asked the question of how are you teaching your students to sell their work,
Mm-hmm.
or like how are you teaching artists how to make a living doing art, and none of the teachers had a way of responding that was positive. In short, one of the teachers almost took offense to it and felt that it wasn't his responsibility as a teacher to do that. And then kind of all of the panelists kind of sort of came to that agreement that schooling is not to teach, how to sell art. It's just to teach, you can't teach people how to sell art,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't believe in that, but it to the same, token, as a musician, I wish I would have had some direction from some of my teachers to take a tax class or an accounting class or some kind of business management class to understand the aspects of the business of music that no one brings up in any music classes, circles, bands,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot to learn as you go because no one touches on those things. And I took a class that was about career concerns at CNM, which I'm grateful that I didn't go to UNM because I'm finding that a lot of these classes I took at CNM, they're taught more by professional artists rather than students, and they're talking about like real life shit. So in career concerns, we were learning about, the fact that you have to go out and like approach galleries and actually put that other side of the work into it.
Interesting.
Because that's a huge part of it. That's
awesome,
like half the battle.
It's half the fight. That's right.
Yeah, you're not going to be that like mysterious artist painting in your basement and your work's just like showing up in the museum.
Nope,
Yeah. Everything that happens comes out of a connection made somewhere because you did something and you showed up and you shook hands and put things on the walls. Like,
yep,
it's all out of your own hustle.
So tell me a little bit about the future of Reyes Padilla. Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Man, 10 years. Jeez.
5, 10 years. However far you want to see in the future.
Well, I
Put
live...
that psychic hat on for a sec, though.
Each year, I kind of take it one year at a time, but in that regard, I always see myself in a upward trajectory. Every year I've had as an artist, I make sure it was better than the last year. And that has worked. And there has been times where it doesn't seem like it's working, and then it like catches up. But I just like feel that with each little bit of experience I get, each show I do, how do I build upon that, rather than have something peak and then go down.
Yep.
Because like I just can't see that happening because I personally won't let it. Like I got a stubborn mindset about it where I'm just like, this has to happen this way, and I'll find the ways to make it work. And artistically, I just keep trying to develop what I have created and what people recognize as my work, and I want to keep challenging myself in using that style in different mediums and 2D, 3D, more murals. Murals are some of the funnest projects I've done, and so I just keep hoping to learn more and more and kind of execute new things each year.
So you brought up one of the things that I wanted to bring up eventually, which was a lot of the big installation pieces and commission work that you've been getting. From the piece that I saw you do on the side of the street on a brick building somewhere to the beautiful piece that you did at the museum in Mesa, Arizona, to the piece that you did in the governor's or in the mayor's office in City Hall.
In City Hall, yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the work you've been up to, man.
Well, the piece on that brick building, that's really my only solo big public work, like where you can drive by it on the street. And so that's in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in this little borough called Braddock. And that was just an incredible experience to go out there. I had done a road trip to DC to deliver a painting and do a show out in DC. And on the way driving back, I went through Pittsburgh and did that mural.
How did something like that come together? You know, for the listener, just hearing, or even someone that follows you on social media, which if you don't, you definitely got to go follow Reyes on both Instagram and Facebook. But to see that as a follower of your work and of what you're doing, well, how does something like that come about? Who reaches out to you to say, hey, come paint a giant piece on the side of a huge building, you know?
Yeah, that's one of those connection things that just happens because you're in the environment. And it actually happened at my uncle's art show in Long Beach, California.
Huh.
So he had a solo show at the Latin American Museum of Art. And a friend of his and my aunt was seeing my work, and she was like, "Oh, my son is living in Pittsburgh, and he's in this part of town that has kind of hit hard times after the steel crash and all that, and they're kind of revitalizing it and putting murals up." And so she connected us.
Wow.
So it was like a connection to a connection.
Yeah.
And, you know, the thing I did at the Mesa Contemporary Arts Museum, I met a very awesome artist named Frank Gonzalez in Santa Fe at one of his openings. And he's the preparator at that museum. And so he had seen my work. We had dinner together, and like a few months later, I learned that he had put my name into this show, and then they had commissioned me to paint like a 1,600 square foot gallery space.
Now tell me about that piece, because me loving seeing the story of the piece and maybe the song it was inspired by, or even just the style of music that you were listening to when you painted the piece. Mm-hmm. So tell me about the connection of that piece that was painted in Mesa and jazz.
Yeah, so the show is around their jazz festival, and so I created my own jazz playlist where I took all my favorite artists in jazz, like Miles Davis and Charles Mingus, and got some John Coltrane, but I got to be honest, like I listen to mostly Bitches Brew like throughout that whole painting session.
Wow, okay.
And
right.
So I was able to just like listen to that and paint, and I kind of went with a more pink and gold tone because that comes like very strongly with all the brass instruments in jazz, and like kind of the wildness of it.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, so a lot of brushstrokes in that piece are a little bit different from some of the ones I make just normally, because jazz has such crazy sudden like spontaneousness to it.
Yes.
And you're painting that in real time, just responding to the music. So sometimes you just make a crazy thing happen on the wall, and you're like, yeah, that was it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And finally, tell me about the piece at City Hall. How did that come to be?
So that's in Hakeem Bellamy's office, and he's now the deputy director to the Department of Cultural Affairs. And man, like he just got his office. He was part of the new administration, and he needed some love on the walls. And I think someone else had mentioned me, like maybe they wanted me in their office, and he just went, "Oh, I want that in my office," and he hit me up. That's awesome. And yeah, it was really cool. That was about a year ago, and he gave me a playlist that him and his lady made. And
that's nice.
Yeah, that's always a fun thing, because a lot of commission work, I'll ask, the buyer if they have something that they're interested in having me paint, something that's close to their heart,
yes.
So I've done things for like wedding songs and things like that.
Yeah.
And I did one for your album.
I know. That was gonna be something I was gonna bring up as well.
Yeah, yeah. So it's cool to be able to like personalize it in that way. Yeah.
It's something amazing to meet somebody who has such a relationship with music, and the result of that relationship with music for them is art. And yeah, man, I was incredibly grateful that you were down to work on my first album, and painting one of the songs from the album in real time. As a matter of fact,
live.
The day that we released the single back in July of 2016, and that was awesome, man. But it's also just awesome seeing the different series you've come out with too. I remember at Zendo, I think it was a series that you did on all hip hop artists or all hip hop music. You've done quite a bit of series in a lot of different events like that. Now I know you have the show coming up with David. What else do you kind of have in the near future that people can keep an eye out?
In August, I'll be doing my first solo show of 2019, and that show is called Retablo, and that's going to be here at the Harwood Art Center downstairs in the main gallery. And it's kind of touching on the fact that in New Mexican culture, a lot of times the first art you're exposed to are retablos, and that's kind of the first thing you make in like catechism. You make a retablo, and you see them all over the place. You go to church, and they're like lining the walls, and so it's always been an inspiration to me without me really knowing it. And so I, as a Chicano Hispanic artist, I've always liked the idea of showing the evolution, that just because we're out here in the Southwest doesn't mean we're doing like that traditional Southwest style. We've evolved just like every other art form out there. And so I want to take some of the concepts of making a retablo and use those in my contemporary practice. So, you got to come and see how that looks. I think it's the first Friday of August 2019, Beautiful. Harwood Art Center.
Awesome. And I know you've got a website, of course, so we're going to put that link within the episode and everything. Before we, move towards the final part of the podcast, I wanted to ask you about, obviously, with synesthesia and with such a deep-rooted connection between music and your art, where else do you find inspiration?
My head. Just like being, I mean, not like in a like obvious kind of sense, but like, I'm very introverted, and sometimes I just get lost in thought, and so being in like the mountains or something allows my brain to just kind of take over and like make ideas happen. Like I definitely got to go to the mountains like solo at least once a year, and it's always when I'm like falling asleep one night and it's just dead quiet and you're like the only one within miles, where something like clicks, like a weird thing clicks, and it's like I feel like it's some sort of message that I need to respond to. So yeah, it's kind of like when I get those quiet spaces, my brain kind of settles down and like shuts up a lot of the weird parts of the day. I get good inspiration out of that.
That's awesome. Now, who are some of your favorite artists?
Ooh, man.
Could be alive, could be local, could be just famous dead artists. Anyone. Could be even your uncle. People that have just touched and affected your life.
Yeah, of course I'm going to say my uncle. He has a way of communicating through sculpture that is so clever and like so relatable. I think it's like a true talent, you know, in its own, aside from the beautiful visuals he's creating. So I get inspired by that cleverness. You know, how are people going to relate, and how can you like bring a topic that, you know, people are going to understand. And let's see, other artists, man. I feel like the artists I look at, they're like those art history artists that everybody's saying, you know. And then a lot of other ones, I'm like just super terrible with names. But I have been drawn more since I started abstract work to a lot of abstract artists. One in particular I learned about when I was getting started with this is Chaz Bojorquez, and he's got a long route with the style that is sort of similar to mine, where it looks, it's kind of graffiti-esque and symbolic. And so I like looking at that and seeing how it's kind of developed over time. I love just seeing murals, you know, everywhere. A lot of muralists I really love checking out. That's just a whole different ball game, you know, painting on that scale. And I'm inspired every time I see a mural and thinking, how'd they do that? You know, what took them there?
Yeah. How long did it take them to make it? Yeah.
Yeah.
All of that. What do you want your art to represent past your life?
Oh, I'd like to kind of change the frame on, like, you know, the idea that comes to mind when you think of a Chicano artist, because I feel like we're put in this box a lot of the time where museums disregard you if they see like a Hispanic name or something, and you're expected to do like a certain thing, and I want to like kind of bring it out of that box. Which I think has been progressively happening since like the 60s and 70s, where people are starting to do different things, not just like total Spanish colonial like religious pieces, to what we're doing now, contemporary work. And it's just as high a caliber, you know, as anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, it truly is.
So, you know, if I could play a part in that and just like getting that recognized, and, you know, us as a state in New Mexico, like being recognized as a mecca, the mecca that it is for artists. I mean, artists are killing it here. There's so much creativity here. And it's one of the best places to start like making a living as an artist. You know, we're not San Francisco prices over here in New Mexico. we make it happen. I mean, Santa Fe's crazy, but here in Albuquerque, we're able to make it happen.
We'll make it work,
easier.
baby. Yeah. That's beautiful, man. So, you know, a through line theme question that I've used kind of throughout my podcast, and I've used the word jazz, so we can kind of substitute the word music for jazz in this situation. But what does music mean to you in your life?
Oh man, music is, I'd say it's like fuel. You know, I can't paint without music. I can't go running without music. Can't drive in the car without music. Can't like get pumped up to do something without music. Like, it's definitely fuel. And I think like I'm always weirded out when people don't like listen to music, or it's just like really low and they don't really care what's playing. Because it just sets the tone for every scene of your life. And so I feel like it's kind of the backdrop, you know.
I love it. And my final question, Reyes, is if you could speak to a younger Reyes or even just a future young Chicano artist coming up in New Mexico or anywhere in the world and seeing your work and wanting to make it into the art world, what are some words of advice that you would give to someone starting out?
Man, stay focused. Learn how to starve a little bit. Like learn how to, like when you're going through that transition, learn how to make every penny count. And just know that it's all for the bigger picture. It's all for growth, and it all builds character. And every hour you put in to your craft, it's like adding up to something great. You know, nothing's going to waste when you're focused on something that you want for yourself, making something positive with your life, and just staying on that hustle.
I love it. Reyes Padilla, it's a pleasure to talk to you, my man, and just kind of get a tiny glimpse into the mind of the artist behind all of this amazing synesthesia work. I call it synesthesia work, even though, of course, synesthesia it's not a disease, because it can be a bad thing, right?
It's a condition.
It's a condition. There we go. I love it, man. I encourage people to check out your Synesthesia, you and David, or St. James Synesthesia exhibit that'll be coming up soon. Where is that going to be again?
That'll be here, the Harwood. April 27th.
And what time is that going to be at?
I think probably around 5 or something.
Great. As well as then the first Friday of August.
Yes.
Is going to be your exhibit.
Here as well.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you again, Reyes.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
I appreciate it, man.
Thanks, man.
That was the episode. Thank you for listening. I'm going to include links to Mr. Reyes Padilla's website, so you can check that out below. Definitely keep up with what he's up to and catch one of his shows as he presents at different places. And as we mentioned in this episode, the shows that are coming up with Mr. David Santiago, or the show that will be happening at the Harwood Art Center for Reyes' own show. As we also talk about in this episode, Reyes had created a piece for one of my songs titled Like Me. I'm going to play that song now, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to Reyes for coming on.
Maybe if you look like, talk like, ate like me, baby, if you act like, drink like, sing like me now. Oh, you would be now on top of the world. Number one, ain't nobody's gonna change your mind with anything. No, you can't believe now in anyone else. That'll bring you down. Ain't nobody's got time for your pessimism, baby. Like me. And if you are down, live strong, chase your dreams and don't give up now. Oh, I know what you want. Happiness is within. Just find that light inside and turn it on. Oh, happy days come when you're working towards what you would like to be now. Oh, you could be now on top of the world. Number one, ain't nobody's gonna change your mind with anything. No, you can't believe in anyone else. That'll bring you down. Ain't nobody's got time for your pessimism, baby. strong. Chase your dreams and don't give up now. Oh, I know what you want. Happiness is within. Just find the light inside and turn it on.